A circle is the set of all points in a plane that are a fixed distance from a given point in the plane. The given point is called the center and is denoted HK as an ordered pair, and the fixed distance is called the radius of the circle. So here we have a set of points in blue all the way around that are at fixed distance r from the center, which is at HK. H on the x-axis, that's the x value of the central point, and k is the y value of the central point. The standard form of the equation of a circle with a center at HK and a radius of r, like this one, is given by the quantity x minus h squared plus the quantity y minus k squared is equal to the radius squared. Let's try an example. Find the standard form, which is the center radius form, of the circle having a diameter with endpoints at 1, 5. So here I see one of the endpoints of the diameter is at 1, 5, and the other endpoint is at 9, 3. So the other endpoint is over here at 9, 3. But those are endpoints of the diameter. A diameter is a line segment that goes through the center of a circle, but that actually has endpoints that are on the circle. So the radius is half of that diameter. The radius is the distance from one of the endpoints of the diameter to the center of the circle. So the first thing we need to do is find that central point by finding the midpoint of the diameter. The midpoint of the diameter will be the center of the circle. The formula for the midpoint is given here. We're just basically going to take the two x values, 1 and 9, and average them. Add them together and divide by 2. And we're going to take the two y values, 5 and 3, and average them too. Add them together and divide by 2. So here we have that calculation. 1 plus 9 is going to be 10 over 2. And 5 plus 3 will be 8 over 2. And then 10 divided by 2 is 5. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So we have the midpoint of the diameter, which is going to be HK, is the point where x is 5 and y is 4. So h is 5, k is 4. All right, now that I've found the center of the circle, if I find the distance from either endpoint to the center, that will be the radius. And to find the radius, we just need to find the distance from either endpoint to the center. So we're going to use the distance formula. So I'm going to take the x value of the center, 5, and I'm going to subtract the x value of one of the endpoints. I'm using this first endpoint, 1. So that's going to be 5 minus 1. And then the y value, 4 minus the y value, 5. So that's going to be 4 minus 5. So 5 minus 1 is 4. And 4 minus 5 is negative 1. When you square 4, you get 16. You square negative 1, you get positive 1. And then the distance from 1, 5 to 5, 4 turns out to be the square root of 17. So the radius of this circle is the square root of 17. Now that I know where the center is, which is h and k, and I know the length of the radius, which is half the length of the diameter, which is the square root of 17 in this case, I'm ready to actually write the center radius, or the standard form of this equation of this circle. This is the standard form of the equation of a circle here. X minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. I know that h is 5 because here h is 5 is the center point's x value. I know k is 4. K is 4. And I also know that the radius length is the square root of 17. So I'm just going to plug all those in, h, k, and r. And I get this. X minus 5 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to the square root of 17 squared. But the square root of 17 squared is just 17. So this is the center radius form of the equation of the circle that has diameter with endpoints 1, 5, and 9, 3. Let's take a look at one last form of the equation of a circle. This is called the standard form, or the center radius form. There's another form called the general form. The equation of the form x squared plus y squared plus ax plus by plus c equals 0 either has a non-existent graph, meaning you can't graph it. That's the case where you have a imaginary radius. Or has a single point as its graph. If it has a single point as its graph, that means the radius is 0 actually. And if the radius is a positive number, then we have the general form of a circle. So this is the general form of a circle in certain circumstances. Let's take a look at one of those cases here with an example. Here is the general form of a circle. X squared plus y squared plus ax plus by plus c equals 0. That's this. Well, it turns out that this equation could have a non-existent graph. It doesn't have to be a circle, or it could be only a single point, or it could be the general form of the circle. They want me to find the center and the length of the radius of the circle with this equation. Well, to find that, it would be easier to have it in the other form, standard form. You see, because in standard form, I know that hk is the center, and then this number over here is the square of the radius. So I can take the square root of whatever that number is to find the radius. So I'd rather to have this equation in this form. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract away the 32 from both sides of the equation, and it gives me this new equation. Just subtract 32 from both sides. Now, what I want to do is I actually want to create these squared binomials here, one with x minus h squared and one with y minus k squared. And to do that, I'm going to use the perfect square trinomial formula, because this is how you factor a perfect square trinomial. And you'll notice the right-hand side looks just like these squared binomials that we want to achieve. So I need to complete perfect square trinomials. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to regroup everything on the left side, grouping everything that has an x in it with everything else that has an x, and grouping the y's together also. So I'm going to regroup to where the x squared and the minus 14x go together, and the y squared and the plus 16y go together. That way I can complete these perfect square trinomials on the left side. So in order to complete these perfect square trinomials, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to try to figure out what I have to add to x squared minus 14x, what I have to add to that to get it to be a perfect square trinomial. I have to figure out what b squared is. And I'm also going to have to figure out what y squared plus 16y needs to have added to it to make that a perfect square trinomial. I need to figure out what b squared is in that situation. But I can't just add those things to the left side of the equal sign. I'd also have to add the exact same thing to the right side. So first, let's start with the x's. Since negative 2bx is negative 14x, that means that this 2b part is 14. And if 14 is equal to 2b, then b is equal to half of 14, which is 7. And if I square 7, I get 49. So the magic number I need to add here to complete this perfect square trinomial is half of 14 squared. Half of 14 is 7, and 7 squared is 49. So I add 49 to both sides. The next thing I need to do is figure out what's going to complete the perfect square trinomial for y squared plus 16y. But in the same way, this 16 is the value of 2b. So I need to take half of this 16 and square it. Half of 16 is 8, and I need to square 8. 8 squared is 64. So I add 64 to both sides. So in order to complete the perfect square trinomial x squared minus 14x plus 49, I had to add the 49 in, so I added it to both sides. And in order to complete the perfect square trinomial y squared plus 16y plus 64, I had to add in that 64, so I had to add it to both sides. The great part about this is now when I factor x squared minus 14x plus 49, I'm just going to get x minus 7 squared. And when I factor y squared plus 16y plus 64, I'm just going to get y plus 8 squared. And then I just combine everything on the right side. And this is what I get. So this trinomial here factors to x minus 7 squared. This trinomial here factors to y plus 8 squared. And these all add up to 81. So now I have the center radius form of the equation of the circle. So what I can do now is I can identify the center and the radius of this circle, because it's now in that standard form. So x minus h is x minus 7. So the value of h is 7. Y minus k is y plus 8, or y minus negative 8, which means that k is negative 8. And since r squared is equal to 81, I just need to know what the square root of 81 is to know what r is. The square root of 81 is 9, so I have h is 7, k is negative 8, and r is the square root of 81, which is 9. So the center is at 7, negative 8 hk, and the radius has a length of 9.